Emma had always lived a quiet life. Between her college classes, part-time job at the local bookstore, and weekends spent curled up with a good book, her days were calm, sometimes too calm. That was why, when the thunderstorm rolled in that evening, she barely noticed the steady drumming of rain against her windows. But then there was a sound she couldn't ignore, a faint scratching at her front door. Curious, Emma pulled on her raincoat and stepped outside, the cold rain immediately soaking through the fabric. She blinked against the downpour and froze. Sitting on her doorstep, soaked to the bone, was a large German shepherd. His dark fur was matted and slick with water, and his eyes, deep and intelligent, locked onto hers. The dog didn't bark or whine. He simply sat, still as a statue, as if he'd been waiting there for hours. Emma's heart softened instantly. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, crouching down and holding out her hand. The dog didn't move, just watched her with that same steady gaze. Slowly she opened the door and stepped back, silently inviting him inside. The dog hesitated a moment, then padded in without a sound. She fetched a towel from the bathroom and wrapped it around his shivering frame. His fur felt surprisingly warm beneath the wetness, and his breathing was steady but heavy. Emma studied him carefully, no collar, no tags. He didn't seem aggressive or scared, just patient. "Where did you come from?" she asked softly, even though she knew the dog couldn't answer. The storm rumbled again, lightning flashing through the windows as if echoing her confusion. Emma found an old bowl in the kitchen and filled it with water and some leftover chicken from dinner. The dog sniffed at the food cautiously, then ate ravenously. She watched, mesmerized, as he licked the bowl clean, his tail giving a tentative wag. After drying him off as best she could, Emma sat on the couch, the dog curling up at her feet. His eyes never left her face. A strange warmth filled the room despite the storm outside, like the dog was soaking in the calm she desperately needed. As the night deepened, Emma realized she should try to find his owner. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. On a local lost and found pets group, no response. Hours passed, but no one came forward. The dog, whom she had quietly started calling Shadow because of his dark fur and silent presence, seemed content to stay. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling there was something unusual about him. He never barked, not even when a thunderclap cracked overhead, and he followed her around the house like a shadow indeed, never more than a few steps away. Lying in bed, Emma's mind raced. How had the dog found her? Why here, of all places? And why did it feel like he understood more than any ordinary animal should? At one point she thought she heard the dog whisper her name, but when she looked, he was just staring calmly into the corner of the room. Unable to sleep, Emma got up and sat by the window. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle, and the dog was lying quietly on the floor behind her. She glanced back and caught his eyes again, calm, focused, and almost knowing. Whatever this dog was, Emma felt sure it was no accident that he showed up at her doorstep that stormy night. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of something that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. In the days that followed, Emma found herself growing more and more attached to the dog she'd named Shadow. He was unlike any pet she'd ever known. He didn't chew on her shoes or bark at passing cars. Instead, he seemed to exist in a world just slightly different from her own, always watching, always waiting. Every morning, Emma woke to find Shadow, sitting patiently by the door, as if he'd been there all night guarding the house. Sometimes, when she left for class, he would stand at the window, his gaze fixed on the street long after she was gone. And when she returned, tired and distracted, he greeted her with a quiet presence, no tail-wagging frenzy, no wild excitement, just calm, unwavering attention. One afternoon, Emma sat on the couch scrolling through her phone when Shadow suddenly rose and padded over to her. Without warning, he placed a large paw gently on her lap and looked up at her with those deep, knowing eyes. Emma blinked, startled by the intensity of his gaze. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, unsure why the contact made her heart race. Shadow didn't move. It was as if he was waiting for her to say something more. Then, almost as if sensing her thoughts, He leaned in and rested his head lightly against her hand. That night, as Emma lay in bed, her mind wandered to memories she hadn't thought about in years, the warmth of her father's smile, the sound of his voice, the way he used to tell her stories before bedtime. She missed him terribly. But what surprised her most was that, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Shadow seemed to understand. The following day, Emma took Shadow for a walk through the neighborhood. As they passed familiar faces, Shadow didn't bark or wag his tail. Instead, he studied each person with a strange intensity, as if reading their stories. When they came across Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly woman from down the street who always fed stray cats, Shadow's eyes softened. He approached her slowly, tail low but wagging slightly, and Mrs. Whitaker smiled warmly. "You've got a special dog there, Emma," she said. "He's got eyes like he knows more than he lets on." Emma laughed it off but couldn't deny. She felt the same way. Later that evening, as she sat alone reading, Shadow suddenly stood alert, ears perked toward the window. A chill ran down Emma's spine when she realized no sound had reached her, but Shadow was listening, watching something beyond her senses. When she looked outside, the street was empty, bathed in the glow of flickering street lamps. Yet Shadow's gaze was fixed on the darkness beyond the yard, where shadows stretched long and thick. Days turned into weeks, and Shadow's strange behaviors grew harder to ignore. He seemed to anticipate events before they happened. One afternoon, Emma mentioned aloud how much she wished her broken phone would start working again. Before she could finish the sentence, Shadow nudged the device with his nose and stared at her expectantly. Moments later, her phone buzzed to life with a message from a long-lost friend she hadn't heard from in years. Emma shivered, both unnerved and amazed. It wasn't just that Shadow was a dog who understood her, it was as if he was connected to her in ways that defied explanation. One evening, during a violent thunderstorm much like the night he appeared, Emma sat curled up on the couch, the lights flickering with every rumble of thunder. Shadow lay by the door, his body tense, eyes fixed on the dark windows as lightning flashed. Then, without warning, he stood and padded quietly to the hallway. Emma followed him, heart pounding. At the end of the hallway stood the old family portrait of her father, taken when she was a child. Shadow stared up at it, then back at Emma. For a moment she could have sworn the dog was trying to tell her something, that he had a story to share, a secret tied to the man in the photograph. But before she could speak, a sudden crash of thunder shook the house, and Shadow's calm demeanor shifted to something else, something fierce and protective. Emma felt safe, though, as if this strange dog was ready to face whatever storm was coming, just for her. She had thought she'd simply rescued a lost dog that rainy night. But now Emma was beginning to wonder if Shadow had rescued her instead. The quiet rhythm of Emma's life was shattered one late autumn night, just after she had settled in for bed. The rain had returned, tapping softly against the windows, while the wind moaned faintly through the trees. Emma was reading when a sudden noise startled her, a sharp crash coming from the living room. Her heart pounded fiercely as she froze, ears straining to catch any further sound. It wasn't a branch falling, she was sure. Someone was inside her house. Instinctively, she reached for her phone, but Shadow was already alert. Without a bark or a growl, the dog rose and slipped silently from the bedroom. Emma held her breath. Following him down the hall in the dim light, from the shadows of the living room came the muffled sound of glass breaking. A window shattered, sending shards scattering across the floor. Emma's hands trembled. The intruder was still there. Shadow moved with an uncanny precision, almost like a shadow himself. He pressed low to the floor and edged toward the front window. Emma could see a man's silhouette crouched near the broken glass, rifling through the drawers of her coffee table. Before she could warn him, Shadow sprang. The man yelped, stumbling backward as the dog lunged with a force Emma had never imagined. The intruder stumbled out the broken window, clutching his arm, leaving a smear of blood on the shattered glass. Emma watched, stunned, as Shadow stood guard by the door, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. Seconds later, she called 911, her voice shaking as she explained the break-in. When the police arrived, they found Shadow sitting calmly on the porch as if nothing had happened. The officers examined the broken window and the scattered glass, but their attention was drawn to the deep scratch marks on the floor and walls, marks that looked like they were made by something sharp and deliberate. "What kind of dog do you have?" one officer asked, kneeling to look at Shadow. Emma shrugged. "He's a German Shepherd, but he's different. He didn't bark or growl, just attacked." The officer frowned. "We can't find any registration or microchip on him. No one's reported a missing dog like this in the area." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The adrenaline from the break-in slowly gave way to a strange mix of fear and awe. Shadow, who had been so calm and silent before, had transformed into a fierce protector the moment danger appeared. But what unsettled Emma most was the way Shadow seemed to understand the situation with perfect clarity, almost as if he had been waiting for something like this. In the days after the incident, neighbors stopped by with questions. Some were amazed that a dog had defended Emma so bravely. Others whispered about Shadow's strange calmness and the mysterious absence of any known history. Emma herself began noticing small, inexplicable things. Shadow seemed more alert than ever, his eyes tracking invisible movements, his ears twitching at sounds she couldn't hear. He followed her closely, almost guarding her as much as the house. One evening, as Emma prepared dinner, Shadow suddenly sat stiffly at the door, ears pricked. She felt a chill as she glanced out the window. A shadow passed quickly across the lawn, disappearing into the darkness. Emma called out, but no one answered. She knelt beside Shadow and stroked his fur. "You're watching out for me, aren't you?" The dog's dark eyes met hers, steady and sure. That night, Emma's dreams were filled with flickering images, faces she didn't recognize, distant places, and a voice whispering urgently. She woke gasping. Shadow curled at her feet, calm as ever. The break-in was supposed to be a terrifying one-time event, but it had opened a door to something far stranger. Emma knew Shadow was more than just a dog, and deep down she felt that his arrival was no coincidence. The question was, what was he protecting her from? After the break-in, Emma's life slipped into an uneasy rhythm. The neighborhood buzzed with quiet rumors about the mysterious dog. Farhat had saved her, but Emma found herself grappling with something far less tangible. Shadow wasn't just a protector. He was a puzzle, a silent companion whose presence stirred memories she didn't understand. One late evening, as the wind whispered softly through the trees, Emma sat on her porch with a cup of tea. Shadow lay at her feet, his dark eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the yard. The night was calm, but Emma felt a strange tension hanging in the air, as if something unseen was stirring just out of sight. That night, as she drifted into sleep, the dreams came. They were vivid and strange, unlike any she had experienced before. Emma found herself walking through smoke-filled streets, flames licking the edges of crumbling buildings. Voices shouted in a language she couldn't understand. Somewhere in the distance, a man's voice called out, urgent and desperate. She looked down and saw Shadow. No, not the dog she knew now, but a fierce, powerful creature with eyes like burning coals. He stood by a man in uniform, a soldier, whose face was obscured by shadows. The soldier whispered to the dog, words Emma couldn't hear, but the urgency was clear. Then the scene shifted suddenly. Emma was standing in a dense forest and Shadow was digging frantically near the roots of a great tree. She woke gasping, her heart racing. For days after, Emma was haunted by the dreams. They felt like memories that belonged to someone else, someone who had lived long before her. One afternoon, she took Shadow for a walk to the nearby wooded park he had started to visit regularly. The dog moved with purpose, sniffing and pawing at the base of a large oak tree. Emma knelt beside him and noticed the earth was loose, as if something had recently been buried. Curiosity pushed her to dig carefully, and soon her fingers brushed against something hard and cold. She unearthed a rusted metal box, coated in dirt and age. Her hands trembling, Emma pried it open. Inside were old photographs, faded letters, and a small collection of war medals. One photograph caught her breath. A man in military uniform, young and resolute, standing beside a German shepherd that looked exactly like Shadow. The letters, yellowed with age, told a story of a soldier named Daniel Foster. He had written, about his loyal dog, a companion who had saved lives on the battlefield and had a connection beyond the ordinary. Emma read the words over and over, disbelief mingling with awe. How could this be? The letters were dated more than 40 years ago. Was it possible that Shadow was somehow connected to this man? That evening, Emma sat with the box beside her, Shadow resting his head on her lap as if he sensed the importance of what she had found. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it a whisper, soft, almost inaudible. Emma leaned closer, heart pounding. Was it just the wind, or was someone trying to speak? Shadow's eyes flicked toward the door, alert and watchful. The peacefulness of her life had been shattered, but Emma was beginning to understand that Shadow's arrival was the start of something far deeper than she had ever imagined. She wasn't alone anymore, and whatever secrets the past held were beginning to reach out to her, through a dog who was anything but ordinary. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery of the box had unlocked something beyond the ordinary. The photographs and letters seemed like a thread connecting her present to a past she never knew existed. And Shadow. Calm, watchful. Shadow was at the center of it all. Days passed as Emma pored over the letters, each one revealing more about Daniel Foster, the soldier who had loved his dog fiercely. Daniel's words spoke of battles fought, dangers faced, and a bond so deep that words often failed him. He wrote about a mission gone wrong, about secrets buried with him, secrets his dog had guarded, even beyond death. Emma's curiosity grew with every sentence. How had this box ended up buried near her home? Why now? And why did Shadow, this living, breathing dog, bear such a striking resemblance to the German shepherd in the photos? She took the box to the local library, hoping to find any records about Daniel Foster. The librarian, an older man with kind eyes, helped her search through dusty archives. They found mention of Daniel Foster, a soldier who had served overseas decades ago, declared missing in action during a secretive mission. No official details were ever released. Emma's mind raced. Could Shadow somehow be connected to Daniel's fate? Could the dog have lived through more than a normal lifespan? It sounded impossible, yet the evidence before her eyes suggested otherwise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat by the fireplace, Shadow curled tightly against her legs. She reread a letter Daniel had written on the eve of his last mission. It spoke of trust, trust in his dog's instincts, in a bond that transcended words or even time. Suddenly, Shadow stood and moved toward the window, eyes sharp and alert. Outside, Emma saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, the same woods where she had found the box. The silhouette was blurred by the fading light, but there was something unmistakably familiar about the way the figure moved. Emma's heart quickened. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside, Shadow following silently. As they approached, the figure turned and vanished into the shadows of the trees. Emma called out, but only silence answered. Back inside, she locked every door and window, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever was happening, she was no longer just an observer. She was part of a story that stretched across decades, tangled with secrets and shadows. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen around the house. Objects moved on their own. Shadows flickered where there was no light. And Shadow, ever watchful, growled softly at empty corners, warning Emma of unseen presences. One night, Emma awoke to the sound of whispering, soft voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. She found Shadow at the foot of the bed, his eyes glowing. Faintly in the dark, "Who's there?" Emma whispered, clutching the dog's fur. Shadow growled low, then padded to the window, staring out into the night. Emma knew she was not alone. Her life had been irrevocably changed by the arrival of a dog she thought was lost. Now she faced a mystery rooted in war, loyalty, and a bond that defied explanation. The past was calling, and Shadow was the key. The nights grew longer, and Emma's sense of unease deepened. Shadow seemed restless, pacing near the windows, ears perked to sounds Emma couldn't hear. The whispers that haunted her sleep began to seep into her waking hours, a faint echo in empty rooms, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. 1. Afternoon, determined to find answers, Emma returned to the wooded park where she had uncovered the rusted box. She hoped to discover more about Daniel Foster's last days, or whatever truth lay buried beneath the earth. Shadow led the way, nose to the ground, moving faster than usual. Emma struggled to keep up, her heart pounding with anticipation. Then, near the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, Shadow stopped and began to dig furiously. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, brushing dirt aside until her fingers scraped against something solid. Together they unearthed a small weathered chest, its surface carved with strange symbols she didn't recognize. With trembling hands, Emma opened it. Inside lay an assortment of objects, a compass, a faded map, and a leather-bound journal. Emma's breath caught. This had to be connected to Daniel's mission. His story was unfolding like a puzzle, piece by piece. That night, Emma sat with Shadow curled at her feet, reading the journal by candlelight. The pages were filled with Daniel's handwriting, describing a secret operation deep in enemy territory. But what caught Emma's attention was a passage about a guardian, a creature of fierce loyalty, gifted with almost human intelligence, meant to protect a hidden truth. Emma's eyes widened. The description matched Shadow perfectly. Could this dog be more than just a companion? Could he be the guardian Daniel wrote about, bound to protect something important even decades later? Suddenly, a soft knock at the door startled her. Emma froze, glancing toward Shadow, who rose slowly and moved to the entrance, growling low. "Emma?" The voice was cautious but familiar. She opened the door to find a man standing there, a stranger with piercing eyes and a calm demeanor. He introduced himself as Mark, a historian who had been researching Daniel Foster's mysterious disappearance. Mark explained that he had been following rumors about Daniel's lost mission for years. The discovery of the box and journal confirmed his suspicions. Daniel had been part of a covert operation involving ancient artifacts and secret societies. Emma's mind reeled. Together, Emma, Mark, and Shadow pored over the journal, uncovering clues that pointed to a hidden location near the woods, a place where Daniel had hidden something valuable before he vanished. Days turned into nights as the trio followed the map's trail, with Shadow guiding them like a beacon. The journey was fraught with challenges, dense thickets, sudden storms, and the eerie feeling of being watched. Yet Shadow remained unwavering, his presence a source of strength and reassurance. One evening, as they approached a clearing bathed in moonlight, Shadow stopped abruptly, ears twitching. Emma shone her flashlight around the area and gasped. There, half buried beneath layers of earth and moss, was an ancient stone altar, carved with the same symbols as the chest. Emma's fingers traced the worn surface, and a sudden rush of energy surged through her. The Guardian wasn't just a protector of Daniel's secrets. It was guarding something much older, something powerful. As the wind whispered through the trees, Emma realized that Shadow's arrival was no accident. He was a living link to a past that refused to stay buried, and the night was far from over. The discovery of the ancient altar left Emma's mind swirling with questions. What had Daniel Foster been protecting? Why had Shadow appeared in her life now, connected somehow to this secret that stretched beyond time? And most unsettling of all, was there more danger lurking in the shadows than she had ever imagined? That night, Emma barely slept. Shadow remained at her side, alert and watchful, as if sensing the growing tension in the air. The whispers that had haunted her before returned, louder now, like voices brushing the edges of her consciousness. Emma felt watched, as if invisible eyes tracked her every move. The next morning, Mark arrived early, his expression grave. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you," he said, glancing toward Shadow. "I've uncovered something in the archives, something that changes everything." He pulled out a folder filled with yellowed newspaper clippings and official documents. They detailed Daniel Foster's mission, an operation designed to recover powerful relics from a hidden site. The documents mentioned a secret group known only as the Veil, rumored to protect those artifacts at any cost. Emma's stomach tightened. "The Veil?" she echoed. Mark nodded. "They don't want those relics found. If they think someone is close, if they believe you or Shadow have what Daniel left behind, They'll come after you. Emma's mind raced. The break-in, the strange noises, the shadowy figure in the woods. It all pointed to something far more dangerous than she had imagined. Over the next few days, Emma took extra precautions. She installed locks, kept Shadow close, and avoided venturing out alone. But the feeling of being hunted grew stronger. One evening, as she returned from the grocery store, Emma noticed a car parked across the street. Dark windows, engine running. Her heart pounded as the driver's eyes met hers briefly before the vehicle sped away. She hurried inside, locking the door behind her. Shadow growled low, pacing near the window. Emma knew the danger was real. Determined not to be a victim, she reached out to Mark. Together they decided to return to the altar site, hoping to uncover more clues and perhaps find a way to protect what Daniel had left behind. Under the cover of night, the three of them, Emma, Mark and Shadow, set out toward the clearing. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling leaves and distant hoots masking the pounding of Emma's heart. Shadow led confidently, his nose close to the ground, guiding them to the altar. As they approached, Emma noticed fresh footprints, large, heavy, circling the area. Someone had been there recently. Suddenly a shadow darted between the trees. Emma's breath caught. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Mark nodded, reaching for a flashlight. Before they could react, a figure stepped out of the darkness, a tall man cloaked in black, eyes cold and unyielding. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and threatening. Emma stood her ground, Shadow growling at the intruder's feet. "We're just trying to understand what happened to Daniel," she said steadily. "We don't want trouble," the man smiled thinly. "Trouble finds those who seek the truth. Leave now or face the consequences." Emma felt a chill, but her resolve hardened. "We won't stop," she said. The man's eyes glinted dangerously. "Then you will learn why some secrets are buried." With that, he vanished into the trees. Emma looked at Shadow, who growled softly but didn't pursue. The message was clear. The past Emma had uncovered was not just a story, it was a battle, and Shadow was her guardian in a fight she was only beginning to understand. The warning from the cloaked man lingered in Emma's mind as they hurried back through the forest. The weight of unseen eyes pressed on them, but Shadow moved steadily, unshaken. Emma felt his calm strength like a shield around her. Back home, the atmosphere was tense but charged with determination. Emma, Mark and Shadow pored over the journal and the relics, searching for a way to protect the secret Daniel had guarded. Then a breakthrough. Hidden in the back of the journal was a map marked with a final location, an old abandoned chapel deep in the woods. Daniel's last entry spoke of a final resting place where the relics could be hidden safely and where the Guardian's true nature would be revealed. The next morning, the trio set out for the chapel, each step heavy with anticipation. The trees thickened and the path grew overgrown, but Shadow navigated with unwavering certainty. When they arrived, the chapel was a crumbling ruin, swallowed by ivy and shadow. Emma felt a strange energy in the air, as if the place itself remembered. Inside, they discovered a stone altar beneath a collapsed roof. Emma carefully placed the relics Daniel had hidden on the altar, whispering a prayer she didn't understand. Suddenly, Shadow began to change. His eyes glowed with a fierce light, and his posture shifted, no longer just a dog, but something ancient and powerful. Emma stepped back, awe and fear mingling in her chest. Shadow's voice echoed, not in words, but in thoughts, clear and commanding. "I'm more than a dog," he said. "I am the guardian Daniel entrusted with the protection of this secret. Bound by loyalty and time, I have waited for the one worthy to carry the burden." Emma's breath caught. The bond she had felt with Shadow was deeper than she ever imagined. "I have protected you because you are the key," Shadow continued. "The relics hold power that must not fall into the wrong hands. The veil will come again, but together we can keep the secret safe." Mark looked at Emma, eyes wide. This changes everything." Emma nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. But she also felt a fierce resolve rising within her. They weren't just fighting for the past, they were protecting a future. In the days that followed, Emma prepared herself. With Mark's help, she strengthened her home and learned more about the relics and their power. Shadow remained at her side, no longer just a companion, but a guide and protector. The threats from the Veil didn't disappear. Shadows moved at the edges of her life, but Emma was ready, and whenever fear threatened to take hold, she looked into Shadow's glowing eyes and remembered the truth, the bond that had saved her, and the ancient guardian who had chosen her. 1. Evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch, Emma whispered, "Thank you, Shadow, for everything." The dog rested his head on her lap, eyes steady and warm. She thought back to the day she had first found him, a dog she thought was just a stray. Now she knew he was so much more, a protector, a guardian, and a friend. And together they would face whatever darkness came next.